Video, I'm going to show you how to create a chart, or specifically a line graph, within Excel of enzyme activity versus amylase concentration from the data that's provided you in the Excel document. So to create a graph, or a line graph specifically, you want to highlight all of the data that's going into the graph. This is going to be rows 4 through 7 and then columns D through P. And then you're going to want to insert and then choose the line graph option. And depending on what kind of look or feel you wish to choose with your line graph, you can pick the varieties that you see here, but just the first one is perfectly fine. And then I usually make the graph a little larger so that I can see that. And then what we want to do is we want to create some aspects to the graph that make it where you can present this data to someone else and they understand what it is talking about. Usually where we're going to do that is the Add Chart Element section. And so first thing that we want to do is make sure that the axis titles are on the horizontal and vertical locations. Right now there are no axis titles, so we're going to just click on that and provide the title location or text box, and then we're going to come in and we're going to type the name that goes into that. For the vertical axis, this is going to be enzyme activity, and then for the horizontal axis, this is going to be time, and in seconds are the units that I use to generate this data. The next thing we want to do is actually, the chart title is usually default text box placement, and so what we're going to do is we're going to actually enter the title, and this will be, it's always the Y versus the X axis whenever you're creating a title, but you can also include additional pieces of information based on what the entire experiment is about. So I'm going to say that this title should be something along the lines of enzyme activity versus amylase concentration over time. And that could be your title. Next thing you want to do is make sure that I know what the different various colors or series are. So what is this kind of orangey color versus the gray versus the red versus this blue line? What are they with respect to one another? And that's where the name of the series comes into place. One thing that I'm a little particular about myself is I don't like having the series legend on the bottom of the chart. That's actually where the figure legend goes, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. So the series, or the legend as your Excel calls that, I like it to be on the right or the left, one of those two positions. Personally, the right doesn't have any kind of busyness like the left does with the vertical axis title, so I just put it on the right. But you need to change the words Series 1 versus Series 2. You need to change those. And really the only place to do that is to go, you have the chart highlighted, and you go to Select Data. And at that point, your data then can be altered as to what goes into the actual graph itself through several points. You can change the y-axis, you can change the horizontal axis, you can change the name of things, and these are some of the things we're going to want to do. First off, let's go ahead and change the series name. So we don't want to call Series 1, these are just default names. We want to actually call it based on what it is, and it's the amylase concentration is none or 0. So we just click that cell, click this button bracket, and it brings us back to that, and see how it changes the Series 1 to the word none. And we'll go to Series 2 and do the same thing, and you do this for all of those. And it's really easy. So we're going to do that. And last one, so now all of this series have the actual name of the amount of amylase. The last thing we want to do to adjust the chart is, if you'll notice on the x-axis, it just has 1 through 13. It just randomly chose times, yet the actual time is 0 through 240 seconds. So we need it to know that these are the values that it's supposed to use, and all of the series use the same x-axis, so we can choose that here, highlight the x-axis values, and then that becomes part of that, or inserted in that, and then all we have to do is click OK, and all of those changes get made. So now your series names are included in the series, and so you can figure out what's what, and the axis on the x-axis has the appropriate numbers of seconds for that item. So this is how you would make a line graph for a particular set of data in Excel. If you're using something other than Microsoft Excel like Google Sheets, there are some varieties of differences of where, say like the add chart element and select data, where they might be located. It's not going to look exactly like this. And also if you're using a Windows-based computer, they may be slightly positioned differently. So just keep in mind that all of these functions are available. You just might have to search for them in a different location. Alright, so this is how you create a chart. How do you actually get this printed out? Well, if you highlight the whole chart, so you're selecting it, you can see it highlighted on the edge, right click, and then you can save as a picture. And if you do that, when you save it as a picture, it will give it a name, and kind of it saves it as the default PNG, but you could change it to say like a JPEG or a PDF. PDF should be the way you do this. And then you want to call it, whatever name you want to call it. If you want to call it Graph 1 or whatever. And then you'll save the location of where it should be. I'm going to go ahead and put that on my desktop and then click Save. And then whenever you open that document, then it will look like just that particular item, the graph itself. Now this is opened in a PDF reader on my computer, and if I wish to add a figure legend, I could do that, or I can actually save this instead of a PDF. I can save this as a document that would be an image. I tend to use JPEG most of the time when I make it an image. We'll call this graph 1 as well. We're going to save that on the desktop, and then I could open Microsoft Word. And when you open Microsoft Word, you can then import or insert that picture from your desktop. So if I choose my desktop, we called it Graph 1, JPEG, insert. And now that picture is inserted in your Word document, and then you can very easily add a text box below that and create a figure legend. Well, what is a figure legend? A figure legend is a statement about that particular item above that describes what is occurring in that figure. So you typically like to have a name, call this like figure 1, and then you would use maybe a one-line statement to describe what the particular item is. And this is, if you just wanted to say that this is an enzyme activity versus amylase concentration over time, that's perfectly fine. That's a sentence that describes enough of what is happening throughout the entire figure. If you wish to add more to that and you wanted to say what the various amylase concentrations were, and you would say your control versus which is none versus up to 10 drops of amylase, you could do that, but it just needs to be a statement that is indicative of what the graph happens to be, and tells you just enough so that if someone weren't talking to me about this and describing it, I could read this statement, look at the graph, and understand and interpret what the graph is trying to tell me. Okay, so this is how you create your graph. This is how you label that graph appropriately, how you create a figure legend, and I've given you a couple of different ways to make that. Once you have finished that particular item, you're going to save all of your documents as PDFs, compile them together into one document, and then you're going to answer your questions also at the end of your lab. I think it's questions 1 through 7, and submit all of that work together as one document for your lab submission. If you have any questions, let me know. Send me an email. We can talk on virtual office hours if you need. And until then, good luck.